You are listening to the Geekly Chronicles.
So, because of all of this Shakespeare excitement, we have an excellent guest lined up to tell us a bit more about the relevance of Shakespeare and what's happening around his birthday. So, James Wright, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hi, James. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for giving us a ring. It's a real privilege and an honour. Thanks. Yeah, cheers.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm Catherine. It's nice to finally get to speak. And you're also listening to...
I'm Gez.
And I'm Chris.
Hello, all.
Hello. Well, and hello to all of our listeners as well that can hear you live.
Excellent.
Yeah, so, I mean, what are you working on at the moment around Shakespeare and this 400th anniversary?
Well, I'm in the sort of very, I suppose you might call it, privileged position to be working for the Museum of London Archaeology. And by really complete happenstance, as the Shakespeare 400 anniversary rolls around, we're actually working on an excavation on the site of the Curtain Playhouse, which was one of the theatres that Shakespeare was both writing for and probably acted at as well. So it doesn't get more authentic than that, really.
Wow, so you're actually digging where Shakespeare used to walk and write, and that's got to,
Yeah.
You've got to feel it when you're there, I suppose.
Yeah, the Curtain was a playhouse up in Shoreditch, and much as it is today, it was pretty much a hotbed of sort of culture and performance in a very, very similar way to its relationship to the city today, back in the 16th and early 17th centuries. And one of the theatres that was constructed there was the Curtain. It was very, very close to another playhouse, which was actually called the Theatre, of which we excavated back in 2008 as well. So, it's a real honour to be able to work on that site, really.
So what kind of things do you find at sites like that?
Well, I suppose there's only been 5 excavations of sort of Shakespearean period playhouses, and the first one is probably the best example to answer that question, and that's the Rose Playhouse down on Bankside, where some of the finds included things like the money pots that the people would have actually put their penny into when they accessed the yard to actually go and watch the plays. And down there they found a really ornate fork for sort of fine dining while they were eating whilst watching plays, and there was lots of sort of drinking vessels, because at the same time they were drinking, and pipes for smoking. So you get in a sort of material culture of the people who were actually turning up, the groundlings, the people who were sitting in the galleries, in much the same way that people eat and drink at Shakespeare's Globe today, in fact, or in ordinary theatres, taking a wine or a beer in there. But on top of that, also there was some of the actual theatrical properties as well. So things like an actor's boot was discovered, and probably the most emotive people, and the one that really excites people, was a cannonball, which was almost probably used for rolling around to create the noise of thunder in certain play scenes as well.
Wow.
So some really quite cool finds came up in the Rose, and that was an excavation in the very late 80s. It was the first time one of these sites had ever been excavated, but now there's up to 5 of them that have been dug now.
Wow. So I suppose, is there anything new that we've recently learned about Shakespeare from these sort of digs? Are there any sort of new revelations about what it was like to go and see a play, or what his life was like? Or...
Well, I think one of the things that has become really important is simply understanding space and understanding how actors would actually be able to use the actual place that they were in, and how that may have affected what was being written and how it was being written for the stage. And I think you can really, really see that when the sort of the data that's been used in the excavations was actually used to rebuild Shakespeare's Globe. The one that's there now, the recreation, and how that space has been used by actors. So one of the things when I first went to a play at the Globe, for example, was understanding how during the amazing play Henry V, how when he's giving some of those quite long speeches, how you were actually his army. And so he's not just giving a speech into air, he's actually giving it to his assembled army in front of him, and the assembled army are the people that are watching the play. And that gives a huge new dimension, which you don't get with a traditional sort of proscenium arch theatre, like some of the West End theatres, where basically there's a big fourth wall blocking everything off, and the audience are there in darkness. When you're actually there in the light, the connection between actor and audience really comes to light. And really, it is that data feeding in from archaeology that's enabled people to actually come around to understanding that, really.
That sounds really different to the experience that we get today. Just actually being part of the performance sounds quite exciting. You must really make your heart race a little bit. I think. Yeah. I want to go to the Globe now.
I was just listening earlier to how you were saying about how people found Shakespeare boring at school, and I think that's really interesting because I found it in some ways boring at school, even though I found the stories very exciting. I mean, Macbeth, I think, is an amazingly fast-paced story with some really interesting ideas contained within it. But when these plays are taught at school, quite often they're taught very, very badly, and they're taught with people sat down, facing the front, looking down into a dry old dusty book and reading the words out loud that they possibly don't fully understand. However, if you actually get up, you get to the front of your classroom and you actually act and engage with the play, it adds a whole new dimension to these plays. So quite often it is the experience of physically connecting with the play. And again, that kind of links into the archaeology as well, which kind of add this new dimension and this new excitement to the plays that possibly throughout most of the 20th century bored school children just didn't get.
That certainly was my experience with Shakespeare at school.
I mean, we were just saying before, I mean, that my drama teacher was pretty cynical about Macbeth, which kind of coloured it a bit for me. But do you think that the way that people experience theatre back in the 15th century compared to now in the 21st, do you think that has an impact on how we interpret and how we engage with Shakespeare's plays? I mean, do you think that people maybe find them boring or different because it's not that active engagement? I mean, I was talking to my brother a little while ago who was saying that he absolutely loves the Shakespeare dramatic plays, but isn't a big fan of the comedies. But maybe that's because those were such a shared experience that people in the crowd were a part of. And do you think that has a bearing?
I think that the comedies for some people are difficult because they have this idea that actually Shakespeare is not funny. But I think a lot of the humour contained within, if the play is acted very well, the humour can be brought and made relevant to a 21st century audience. And I'll give you a really good example of this. Titus Andronicus, which is Shakespeare's bloodiest play, it's a right old bloodbath, 33 people get killed. You wouldn't think that would be particularly funny. However, it is full of the most sort of black comedy. And within it, it has the very, very first written example of a very, very popular type of joke that we're all still doing in the 21st century. Titus Andronicus has the original "your mum" joke contained within it.
Oh, really?
Right? One of my favourite.
The very, very first one that has ever been recorded. And, that was funny in the 16th century, and to certain people, it's still funny in the 21st century.
So's your mum.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all there. And if it is interpreted right by a good actor and a good director, those comedies are still relevant in the 21st century, and can easily be made relevant.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right, yeah. There's just one last thing that I kind of wanted to know. Is there anything that we kind of don't know about Shakespeare? Is there anything we've yet to uncover?
Yeah, there's so much. His biography is really, really difficult to interpret. That's been used by a lot of people to say, oh, well, we don't know much about Shakespeare, or we can't prove this about Shakespeare, or maybe Shakespeare wasn't actually Shakespeare. But I think you have to look at it in the light of Shakespeare in comparison to lots of other people in the 16th and 17th centuries. And most biographies of most people at that time, even quite famous people, have great big gaping holes in them. And the most famous, one of the most famous things that we don't know about Shakespeare is basically what he was doing during the 1580s. They're called the lost years, the 7 years where he doesn't appear in any records whatsoever. And people wonder how he went from provincial lad in Stratford-upon-Avon to being a reasonably big smash hit on the London stage by the early 1590s. And we obviously all really, really love to know what was going on there. And unfortunately, the records just don't exist. One of the things that you do have to remember is that when reconstructing people's biographies in the period, you're doing it quite often when extraordinary things happened in their lives, usually as a result of them being up in court for doing something or being involved with something that was a little bit sly. So we know quite a lot about Shakespeare in the 1590s, for example, because he wasn't very keen on paying his taxes. And he keeps appearing in the court records for non-payment of taxes. So
isn't that how we all want to be known?
Yeah. Well,
sort of 1590s Panama Papers situation.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the things are when he's up in court. He was up in court for being involved with what was called a violent affray. Basically, he got involved in a street fight. Again, not particularly different from any of his other contemporaries. Most of these actors and people involved in the theatrical world were involved in street brawls and duels and fighting.
Well, and I always get violent when I listen to the Fray as well. It's
So, what can we get involved with around Shakespeare this weekend? Looks like there's loads of events going on. Is there anything you're involved with? What can we get involved in?
Yeah. I'm involved tomorrow in a tour of Shakespeare's Shoreditch, and we'll be taking in some of the sites, including the theatre and the curtain, and some of the stories of the actors and the acting community in that area of Shoreditch.
So Shakespeare's Shoreditch.
Shakespeare's Shoreditch, because he was a resident there. He was a resident and an actor in Shoreditch. Yeah.
So Shakespeare was an original hipster.
Absolutely.
Shakespeare was a hipster before it was cool.
Yeah,
the haircut and the beard, definitely.
The beard, the haircut, that thing that he wore around his neck. What's that called? The what are those
ruff
called? The ruff.
With the underpropper.
Yeah.
Those are starched underpropper.
Yeah, a starched underpropper with a latte in his MacBook in a.
You can see him writing a play in a Starbucks, can't you?
He wrote Macbeth in that little independent coffee shop. You know, the one next to the Bible shop, by the charity shop that sells all of the nice clothes that everyone wants to buy. That's Shakespeare's Shoreditch, right? This might be why I'm not an archaeologist.
On top of the tour tomorrow, which is completely sold out for obvious reasons because everybody wants to do something on the 23rd, we've also got quite an extensive programme of events which are stretching on right the way through to the end of May, which are surrounding our excavation as well. So there's going to be other guided tours. There's a whole programme of talks, including people like the actor Ben Crystal and the guy who's head of the Birthplace Trust up in Stratford-upon-Avon, Stanley Wells, and our own Heather Knight, who's going to wrap up the whole series as well. And people can find out about those on the Museum of London Archaeology website as well. So we've still got quite an extensive programme going on. And then there's also our partners as well who are involved in Shakespeare 400, so King's College and the Globe and the Rose and lots of other organisations.
So if we Google Museum of Archaeology, Museum of London Archaeology and Shakespeare, or Shakespeare 400, we'll be able to find out about those events.
Yeah, they'll just take you to the events pages, and people will be able to find out full details from there. Yeah,
it does sound really exciting. I mean, it's such a one of the things that I loved about the Olympics in 2012 as well, and the way they did that opening ceremony. I love things that celebrate the diverse kind of culture and things that we have here. And obviously, this is a global show, and there are plenty of people listening from all over the world. But no matter what country you're in, you've probably heard of Shakespeare.
If nothing else, because of how much he did for the English language, as we were saying earlier.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And if you heard my little dig at the American language there during the Geekly Guide to Sport as well, with the football reference. But I think the language has changed and evolved so much in every different country and across every different language barrier. And Shakespeare just seems to have done so much for language, for literature, and for for entertainment and for plays in general. I mean, it's hard to think of someone that's had such a huge impact for such a long period of time. Yeah, I was just trying to think back to the 15th century, but unfortunately I wasn't alive then. So before we say goodbye, I would absolutely love to know, what is your personal favourite thing about Shakespeare, whether it's one of his plays, a fact, or anything? What for you is that kind of thing where when you think of Shakespeare, you get the warm and fuzzies?
I think it's the way that you never quite know what he himself was thinking. He never gives you his own specific opinion of what's happening in his plays. So he doesn't judge. And the fact that his plays can be interpreted in so many different ways, and that they are layered, full of different levels of information, how there's topical references from the time of the play that he's writing. Quite often in his plays, if he was writing, say, Henry V about 15th century France, actually there's elements of the story which are about the contemporary political scene, about a war in Ireland in the 1590s. It's that kind of layered information, and the way that one thing will actually appear to be something else as well. You never quite get his own voice. He's given you both sides of the argument constantly. You can see that in plays such as Othello. His great exposition of race within culture as well. So I think it's the fact that Shakespeare was quite Janus-faced. That's the thing that really, really appeals to me about the bard. Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote all those thousands of words, and yet we still don't really know him.
No, no, but yet the things he wrote still seem to be relevant and topical today, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
Exactly, because you're able to interpret them in so many different ways, and it just fascinates me the deep layers of learning that he actually put into his own plays, and how they can be interpreted on so many different levels. It's just absolutely mind blowing that they were doing that in the 16th century, when really theatre and playhouses was so radically new. They got it so right so quickly.
Amazing.
And we're all just sat here in front of Netflix.
Hey, Netflix gets it right.
Yes.
No, not that we're being paid by Netflix or anything. Other streaming services are available.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. That was a brilliant insight into the world of Shakespeare.
It's the Geekly Chronicles.